This is Hannibal here from thehannibaltv.com, and today we have back one of our most popular guests, former WWE star, former Impact Wrestling star. I believe he had a cup of coffee in WCW, and now he operates Ohio Valley Wrestling. Mr. Al Snow, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing great. Hope you're doing well too.
Other than the gym still being shut down here, I'm doing all right. Is OVW back up and running?
No, not yet. We're still under lockdown rules. We can't operate, can't run any events. We can't operate the trade school. Everything's pretty much been locked down since March. So we're waiting to get word here, hopefully very soon, and then we can get started back up again and get going.
Has there been any government funding or anything to make up for having your business closed for all these months?
We did get one of the PPP loans, or the I think it's the PPE or for the employee protection. We did get one of those loans, but other than that, we've not gotten anything else.
So obviously that's a big hit for you financially. You probably had to cancel shows and no money coming in from the training school. Is it true that you were actually thinking of moving OVW to Florida, or was that kind of just a joking remark in relation to the lockdown?
No, Destin, Florida, the city of Destin, Florida, there were some officials there who reached out and we began a conversation, and we had spoken to a Florida senator, about some potential possibilities and what it would take to motivate us to relocate. And we didn't want to, but if things don't change, I mean, it'll put us out of business. I mean, nobody can continue to survive like this with literally no money coming in at all. So we got to make adjustments.
Now, you just came from LA where you attended Shad Gaspard's funeral. I believe you were the head coach in Ohio Valley Wrestling when he was training there. It's a terrible situation. Is there any memories you could share with us about Shad?
Um, yeah, I met Shad when he tried out for Tough Enough 2, and he actually had made it onto the show, but there was some confusion. And when it came to his physical, something, I think it was, they thought he had hepatitis or something, tested positive for that. And then when they went back after we had already cast the show, they found out that the physical was wrong. There was a mistake. And, but at that point, MTV had decided they had already moved too far forward and they couldn't go back and give Shad the opportunity. And then I reconnected with Shad here in OVW years later when WWE sent me down here to run the developmental program. And, Shad was an awesome, amazing individual that at times, could be as frustrating as hell and made me want to choke him until he shit his pants. And at other times you just wanted to hug him and, you know, um, just grab him and squeeze him. And because, that's the case with all of them though, really. It's just they can be very frustrating to deal with. But at the same time, you care about them and you want to see them do well. And, you know, um, it puts you in a very interesting position because you've got to drive them and push them and have them almost hate you. But at the same time, if you don't, then, you don't care enough about them and don't care if they succeed. And most of the time when people are with me, they usually end up hating me. So
Now, for Shad, it seems like he probably could have had another good run left in him. He still looked great, even at the time of his death. Do you think that was a matter of him just not wanting to keep at it, or was there something else at play there?
well, I definitely think that, both Shad and JTG could have definitely had another run. I mean, that concept, that idea that once you get released from WWE, that's it. Like you're pushed off a cliff and you're gone is ridiculous. I mean, it's, especially if you use that time correctly, um, while you're there, on that platform. One, you can always return. You can always go back. Two, you can always go to other platforms, especially with AEW opening up, and Ring of Honor is still doing, running, and Impact Wrestling. There are definitely opportunities that, I think would have came up for both of them at some point down the road. I just think that at the time, Shad was directing his focus more out there in Hollywood to his acting and his writing and things like that. And I think he was really trying to push for that. And I think probably part of that motivation was his son. It's hard to have a family and to be on the road. It's not impossible. Um, in any way, shape, or form is it impossible, but it takes a lot more work and it takes a lot more sacrifice. And you've got to raise your children to understand that, you don't live the typical type of life that their friends do, their friends' family do. We all get raised with that idea that dad goes to work, like it's still the 1950s, mom's Doris Day, it's the Aussies, mom stays at home, works, and or stays at home, and then dad goes to work, or mom goes to work and dad goes to work, but they both come home at the end of the day, and then you've got Saturday and Sunday, and to be truth be told, most people that live that life, they really don't have that much quality time uh, with their families in the first place. I had that conversation years ago with some guys that worked at AutoZone who recognized me, and they were, made the comment like everybody does. Oh, you're probably never at home. You're never around your family. And I'm like, I am. I'm probably around my family more than you. And they were like upset, insulted. And I said, well, how much do you work? And they're like, well, we work 6 days a week, 12 hours a day. I said, so you probably get up probably 6 o'clock in the morning, go into work. You're there for 12 hours. You come home, you eat dinner when you barely speak to anybody because you're tired, you're worn out. You sit down in front of the TV to go mindless for another 2 hours, and then you go to bed because you got to get up so early. You do that 6 days a week, got one day off, and you're doing everything you can to catch up on the other 6 around the house. And one of the things that you miss, though, is that you don't spend any real time with your family because you're too busy doing everything else. Whereas I'm away, and when I come home, I'm 100% home, and I'm home for days at a time. Granted, I'm gone for days at a time, but I come back and I dedicate my time to make up for what I was when I was away. Because I consciously am aware that while I was gone, they didn't have a father or a husband, and now I've got to come back and be those as well.
Now, in the late 90s, in the Attitude Era, the travel schedule was a little more hectic than it is today. I mean, even before the lockdown, I believe WWE was cutting back on house shows. AEW, on average, is running once a week, twice a week pay-per-view days. But what was the hardest part of that Attitude Era schedule for you?
Well, that schedule wasn't terrible. It was hard. It was a grind, because what you did was you went out Friday for a house show. Saturday was a house show. Sunday was a house show or a pay-per-view. Monday was Raw. Tuesday was SmackDown. You went home Wednesday. You had Thursday, and you left Friday every week. When I first came to WWF, the schedule was that we would go out we were going to work no more than 23 days a month, is what JR told us. Made an announcement that we were not going to work any more than 23 days a month. And that would be, we'd go out for 14, we'd go home for 3, we'd go back out for, you know, 9, come home for 4, like that. And, you were on the road 14 days straight. So that's a little tougher. I remember the first trip to Germany in 95, 96, somewhere with the company. We were there for 19 days straight in Germany, and that was the typical schedule. And years prior to that, you were out on the road. I've heard you know, guys, Von Raschke one time when we were having a conversation, Baron Von Raschke and I, and he was talking about how he had been on the road. I think it was 150 days, 156 days straight, came home for 2, went back out for another like 143 or something like that, you know.
Wow.
And that was pretty typical. As you worked, a 7-day a week schedule, Monday through Sunday, and then started right back up the following week. And a lot of that's, changed now. Like I said, like you said, like, we had that schedule during the Attitude Era where we had every week, we had at least, basically we had a day and a half off, maybe 2 days total. If you count you got home Wednesday afternoon, you had all day Thursday, and then you usually left either, you tried to leave as late as you could on Friday so that you could get to the first town. Um, the bad thing for me was I lived just north of Dayton, Ohio still, and every flight was a connection no matter where I went. So I had to leave earlier to make sure I got into the towns in enough time. So
And you mentioned Jim Ross. He was the head of talent relations for a while in WWE, but I know you've had lots of experiences with him over the years. What's your opinion of him overall as a announcer and as an administrator in wrestling?
well, as an announcer, I think Jim's one of the all-time best. An announcer, a commentator's job is to do basically 2 things. One's to tell verbally the story that you're supposed to be telling physically in the ring, and 2 is to sell the whole concept, the whole idea of what we're trying to really sell, which is that you're watching an actual competitive sporting event, an actual combat sports event, where at any moment, at any time, either one of these guys could potentially win. And you have to sell that emotionally. And he does a great job of that. He really does. Gordon Soley was fantastic at really explaining and analyzing the strategies that he'd try to create from what he watched within what the wrestlers were doing in the ring. Lance Russell was very competent and very good at being the voice of the fan, great at showing emotionally how he was disgusted with a heel's actions or, happy for a babyface without, being really like he was favoring one or the other. He was great at that. And JR is awesome, just amazing at making you feel like you're really watching, a competitive combat sporting event. And, you just don't get any better when it comes to that, especially emotionally. He really believes. Same with Jerry Lawler. I mean, the older I get, the more of a fan I become of Jerry Lawler and just how truly talented that man is. And it surprises me too that when you hear a lot of guys these days and they're like, who should I watch? Who should I watch? Who should I watch? And nobody mentions him. They mention everybody but him. And I'll tell you what, if there's one person you should watch, it should be Jerry Lawler. He is still out there and he is still able to truly, in the real essence of the word, work an audience and make them feel like they get their money's worth. He's amazing. And he never sits in on pre-production meetings. He doesn't take notes. He never has. He wants to go out and react for real to what he sees and plays off of JR and does an amazing job. As an administrator, I think JR was, I thought he was great. He was always direct as he could be. You have to understand that, when you're a cog in the wheel, you're an administrator, you're not the final say. So there are a lot of things that maybe, he would like to tell or would like to say to talent, but he necessarily can't communicate. But he was always open. He was always honest. And, you could see in his booking of talent that he was always attempting to find guys that kind of fit that mold of being able to sell the legitimate idea of a wrestling match. He's a big student of Bill Watts, and Bill Watts was very much the same way. And Bill Watts was a student of Eddie Graham. He sat under Eddie Graham and learned from Eddie Graham and used that in the Mid-South days, and then now JR still carries that forward.
And you talk about selling a wrestling match. I know The Undertaker's career is winding down. I'm not sure if you've seen any of these Last Ride documentaries where it's showing him hugging wrestlers that he's wrestled after the match, talking to them before. Recently, with this Jericho Mike Tyson angle, there's pictures coming out of the two of them together and goofing around backstage. Do you think that the kayfabe era of wrestling is over? Or do you think it could still be around? And what do you think should be done these days with this social media area and behind the scenes era?
Um, where to begin? Uh, I don't think kayfabe's dead because kayfabe was never what people think it is. For one, it was just a code word that we used within the locker room, and we'd use it within the context of a sentence. That way, we didn't tip off whoever might be around that they were about to hear or see something that they shouldn't see. Um, Contrary to popular belief, uh, the general audience, especially here in North America, predominantly have known that wrestling is predetermined since the 1920s. Take that in, since the 1920s. When I was 12 and 19 or 14, when I was 14 in 1978, and I love all my family dearly, but none of them are Mensa candidates. When I went, and none of them were professional wrestlers. When I proclaimed that I wanted to be a professional wrestler, every one of them on both sides said, "Why do you want to do that? That's fake." Now, if we follow the common course of popular opinion now, they weren't geniuses. They weren't professional wrestlers. How did they know? Because everybody's known. Okay. It's the same with magic. Intrinsically, there is only one thing that's fake about wrestling, and that is just that the outcome is predetermined. We're not selling pain, we're selling the intent. We're selling that what we're doing is going to actually lead us to win or keep us from losing. That's what we're selling. And that's what's been lost because nobody sells that anymore. Okay. We sell who we are and why we do it. Most performers today sell what they do, not who and why. And that's the truth. That's not an opinion. That's exactly what they do. Kayfabe is simply a respect for your audience and a respect for your own business. And what I mean by that is it's no different than if you were to go watch a major motion picture. They do kayfabe. Okay. What they do is they go to great lengths. And please understand, the wrestling business is diametrically completely opposite and different than Hollywood. They're not the two same animals. Okay. They are in some degrees. Case in point, we have to carry on and sell our gimmick, our character, who we are 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, if we really want people to invest emotionally and to the point to where they are motivated to get other people to want to pay to see you. All right. Because they enjoy it so much. And the only way they'll ever enjoy it so much is if they really can believe they can invest in it. And the same goes for Hollywood. Those people live a gimmick, and it's called being a movie star. The Hollywood studios created that gimmick of celebrity or movie star years ago because no matter how much you loved Tom Cruise in his last movie, there's no guarantee you're still going to pay to see Tom Cruise in his next movie. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, Tom Cruise's job is not to act in a film. It's to motivate you to want to pay to see him. That's why movie stars are held in higher esteem than television stars, because in order for you to watch a movie star do his job, you have to leave the comfort, safety, and security of your house, drive to a theater, pay, and then sit in the theater. Whereas if you watch a television star, it takes all the effort of turning on your TV and switching to that particular show. Dramatically different. Okay. Arnold Schwarzenegger is not a great actor. He's better now, years later, but back in the day in his run, he was terrible. But People paid to see his movies. And that was why he continuously got to do more and more movies. Not because he was some master thespian, but because he could motivate people to leave their house and pay to see him. When you watch a film, no matter how great the film was, if you see something in the movie while you're watching it, something even small, case in point, the last season of Game of Thrones, when the people saw a coffee cup setting in one scene, how much of a shitstorm did it create on the internet? Because it took people completely out of that world, out of that story, and then it ceased to be entertaining. Okay? Same with magic. Magic, the intrinsic thing about magic being fake is that you are buying a ticket for them to be able to convince you that they can alter reality or defy the laws of physics. We all know they can't. But magicians go out of their way to never reveal how they do it, so they can always leave you in some kind of wonder and awe. And in my opinion, because the one job of a professional wrestler is not to wrestle, it is to motivate an audience to leave their homes and to pay to see them. Your job, especially now with the pandemic, the riots, it's going to become mass shootings. It is becoming increased, and the variety of entertainment that a person can access in their own homes, it is becoming exponentially difficult to do that job. Okay. And that really ultimately is your job. Your function in wrestling is to do nothing more than to motivate people to show up. Your value is not what you think you're entitled to, because it's not Walmart. You don't get paid based on time served, period. I don't care how talented you are. I don't care how much experience you have. If I put your name on a form of advertisement and nobody buys a ticket to see you, your value is zero, period. If you've not done anything to draw additional people into the building, you are not entitled to get paid. Well, I do. I left the house. Well, guess what? Don't bother. Stay at home. I have a price. Well, you're never gonna get it. That's your value. And the more you sell a product, which is yourself and who you are and why you do it, and the more successful you are at selling that, the more invested an audience becomes. And the more invested an audience becomes, the more disappointed they are when you give them glimpses of the fact that it's not who you really are, that they bought into, that they wanted to watch the show. They really wanted to buy into and believe that you and the other guy had this heated rivalry, regardless of what it was about. Because let's remember, all the stuff backstage, which has always happened for years, for decades, it's always happened. Now we have writers. We've always had angles and storylines with wrestling, but it was to add a personal gravity and consequence to the outcome, to make you emotionally invested in wanting more to see one person win and the other person lose. That was all it was for. But if we now, in the middle of that telling of the story, we put up pictures of the two of us hugging and hanging out, and it was just, we just put one over on you. We've now just literally made an audience feel like, well, I just bought what you sold me. And now I'm finding out it's not. So now I have buyer's remorse. I always use this analogy. I create a toaster. Why? Because everybody loves toast. Toast is amazing. It's the greatest food in the world. So I'm going to make a toaster. It's going to be all chrome. It's going to be 16 slices. It's going to have a bagel gimmick in the center. It's going to have 24 settings. You see a commercial, i.e. a wrestling show or a wrestling match for this toaster. And you're like, oh, that's an amazing toaster. I've got to go buy it. You drive down to your local Walmart or Tesco or whatever you want to call it, Costco, and you see on the shelf a box, and it has a picture of all chrome, 16 slice, bagel gimmick in the center, 24 setting toaster. You're sold. You're going to buy it. Take it off the shelf, take it to the counter, pay for it, take it home, open the box. It's all black. It has 4 slices, no bagel gimmick, and it has 12 settings. Are you happy?
No.
No. Are you going to buy another toaster from me?
No.
No. But hey, I've sold you who I am, and I've sold you why I'm doing it, and you've bought into it, and you care about it, and now, hey, fuck you, I'm here. We had a great match. It was fun. We had a good time. It was all a joke. You gonna buy it again? You're more likely to follow it now. You're more interested in telling your friends and family you got to see this. Here's how valuable it is. Still to this day, I have people from all walks of life walk up to me in airports and ask me, hey, does Steve Austin really hate Vince McMahon? Hey, is Vince McMahon as much of an asshole as he is on TV? They believed in those two people, and they believed in the enmity between them to the point to where years later they still come up, and that's one of the questions they ask. I cannot tell you the number of times I've had conversations with fans, again, all walks of life, all different ages, you know, different parts of the country, different parts of the world, tell me this story of, oh yeah, I remember watching that years ago. You know, they'll, well, what do you do? I'm a professional wrestler. And of course they always go, well, don't slam me. And it's like, well, what do you do? I'm a used car salesman. Well, don't sell me a car right now. Who thinks of that stuff? You know, don't be ridiculous. But
Now,
they'll go, hey, I used to watch wrestling and I really got into it. And I saw guy A and he was feuding with guy B. And then I was at the arena, or I was at a restaurant, or I was at a bar, I was at a hotel, and I saw the two of them walk in as friends. And the minute I did, it ruined it for me. And I never went back. The internet and social media are not the problem. All of you are the problem. It's how you use the internet and social media. You all sat there, including you all sat there and were like, oh, Matt Hardy's a genius. He's incredible. He's amazing. He never breaks character. What do you think we've been doing for decades prior to Matt Hardy finally doing it himself?
not breaking character.
Right. Because we never sell what we're doing. We've always sold who we are and why we do it. An audience will never relate to what we do. They won't, because they've never done it, except for maybe 7 or 8 different moves that we do that everybody knows how they feel or experienced. Other than that, though, they'll never get it. Football, baseball, and basketball in the United States have enormous audiences, and the reason is because everybody, your audience in Canada that does in the United States. That's why soccer is bigger all over the rest of the world than it is here. The 3 top television sporting events in the world are as follows: the World Cup of Soccer, the World Cup of Cricket, and the World Cup of Rugby. Super Bowl ain't in it. You ask an American, what's the 3 top in the world television sporting events? Super Bowl, number 1. No, it's not. And trust me, I've watched cricket. I don't get it. And so I won't watch it anymore. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know.
But there is a massive audience out there who do get it because they've played it throughout their lifetime. In professional wrestling, before you stepped inside a ring, you never knew what it was like to hit the ropes, hit that mat. You ask an audience what that mat is, they'll tell you it's a canvas, it's a trampoline or a mattress. And we both know that nothing could be further from the truth. You know, they think it doesn't hurt. Oh, you know how to fall, so it doesn't hurt. No, I know how to fall. It still hurts. I just don't get injured, you know, or injured as bad.
Yeah.
So do yourself a favor, all of you, because it's your business. The wrestling business is the wrestler's business. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. It belongs to the wrestler, not the promoters, not the writers, not any one single entity. It belongs to the wrestlers. It's your business. Take it back. Have some respect for yourself and your endeavors and make your job easier. Invest in selling who you are and why you do it. And if you aren't comfortable doing that around your friends and family, and I give this advice all the time to the students and the talent here in OVW, and none of them listen to me, make 2 platforms. One that's private, and you can share your private life with your friends and family, and only your friends and family can access it. And then make one that's public and be the thing, be the person, be the idea you've sold on TV 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Now, a fan sent me a clip of CM Punk talking about you. He did a Q&A, and I guess he referred to you and Nova as stooges stemming from something regarding Tony Atlas at OVW, and he also said you attempted to get the Majors brothers fired. So I'm wondering what your
It's
thoughts are.
ridiculous. Here are my thoughts. Either Punk is a liar or someone who told him that is a liar. I can tell you unequivocally, I have never tried to get anyone fired, ever, ever. I've never tried to get anyone fired or released, I should say. And I never stooged anybody off. And in fact, I had so much heat with the office because I was going out of my way to protect everybody that was in OBW. And that was part of the reason that I got released, was not because I was telling the office anything. In fact, the office was trying to find things out, and they found out about the Tony Atlas thing incident between him and Tony. And then I got held responsible because I didn't shut it down.
Okay.
So again, either CM Punk is a liar, and I will say it to his face, or whoever told him that is a liar. I have swear on my children's lives, never once have I ever tried to do anything. In fact, the exact opposite. I've pushed and I've worked and I was there 7 days a week with those guys, almost 24 hours a day. It was every house show I was watching, critiquing, and always because I was trying to push them to be as good as possible, because I knew that if they had the opportunity, they went up, they'd only get it that one shot. They only have one chance to make a first impression. So I would push, trying to ensure that when they did get that chance, they'd make the most of it. And that's the God's honest truth. Now, did they agree with me? Did they like it? No, I'm telling you, they didn't. Because let's face it, I can tell you right now, honestly, Devin, I can tell you this unequivocally. Wrestlers are the biggest group of cunts on the planet. No matter what we do, and I've been one for 38 years, narcissistic, egotistical, needy, insecure people on the planet. No matter what you do for a professional wrestler, it is never enough. And I can prove it. Here in OVW, we literally became the world's first ever accredited trade school. And in honor of that, and trying to lift the level of and actually have higher standards when it came to training, we had a combine like the NFL. We had actual scientific instruments to measure their kinetic movement that would be able to anticipate a potential injury to a weakness in their form. We had, physical tests. We had intellectual, where we tested their IQ, their psychological, everything, just like the NFL. You get a 2-year scholarship. You get to attend school for 2 years for free. On top of that, you get housing for free. 2 years, you don't pay rent, you don't pay utilities, all you get is you get Wi-Fi, you get the cable television, you get a roof over your head for nothing. All you got to do is show up and work and give 100%. I had a group of 5 wrestlers who did the combine, got the scholarship, were able to stay in a home, a home with multiple bedrooms for free, and they were complaining and bitching about the fact that they had to have a roommate in the room, living for 2 years for free, no expenses, and it was not enough for them. They were still upset. One of them even telling me how expensive it was for his life to maintain his lifestyle. And I'm like, I get it. You do realize by not paying rent and not having to pay utilities, you'll have extra money to afford your expensive lifestyle. Still couldn't get it. Spent 3 hours complaining to me about the fact that they were going to get to live rent-free, utility-free for 2 years, and they were upset about the fact that they had roommates.
You didn't teach them the trick of finding a rat to live with if they didn't like that most wrestlers know.
Well, I try not to teach the carny shit. So,
well, that's very interesting. And I had another fan question. Last time I interviewed you, you talked about Marty Jannetty and the IcoPro pills and the farts that he would make. And they were wondering if you had any other rib stories about Marty.
Marty, oh my God, where do I start? It never ended. If you left him sit and he got bored, his brain would start to work and he'd just start doing shit. And being in a room with him was like being in Indiana Jones in the Temple of Doom. It was just, one time he was taking a shower and he took a long time. And the reason why was because he had unscrewed the shower head and stuffed KY jelly in the shower head. So when I went in and take a shower, all the KY jelly squirted out on me. It just, you never knew what he was going to do. The shower curtain, he spent time, he took all the hooks to where he loosened them up to where I went to push the shower curtain back. It fell. I had to rehook the whole thing up. It never ended. When we drove by in Montreal, we saw a skunk in a median one night. And, he wanted to stop the car and we jumped out. We were trying to capture the skunk because he was wanting to release it in the locker room, Davey and Owen one time ribbed him and put a padlock on one of his singlets, the one that he liked to wear, the black one. He didn't like to wear this other one that we had. He had to wear it all the time on the road. And keep in mind, this is when we go out for 14, 15 days at a time. So he could not get that lock off for weeks. He tried everything while he was home, off the road, when he come back out. He tried everything to get that lock off. And we're up in New Albany, and we're running upstate New York, and we're running Maine. And last night on the tour was Bangor, Maine. And whenever we'd stay in a town for a few days, which we'd try to get the same hotel and stay there for 4 or 5 days in a row, so we didn't have to keep packing up and unpacking and packing. And when we would, he would go to the grocery store and we'd buy food so we could help save money. So we go to the grocery store. Marty buys a bunch of food, and he buys peel and eat shrimp in a bag, like a pound of peel and eat shrimp. And he eats the shrimp and he keeps the bag of brine. And I'm like, what are you doing with that? And now keep in mind, Davey and Owen had put that padlock, and he was so hot at those guys for padlocking his gear. He's like, I'm gonna get fucking Davey and Owen back. And I'm like, when are we gonna do this? He goes, the last night of the tour. That's, we're gonna wait until they got to go home. I go, okay. So we kept that bag of brine in the room for like 5 days. The smell, and we didn't realize it was the bag of brine, but the smell, like the worst, dirty, athletic, sweaty sock smell, was in that room, to the point where we complained to the hotel, changed rooms because of the smell. And it was like close to the last night, because we kept it in there for probably 3 or 4 days. And so we put it in the car. That was when we realized, it's coming from that plastic bag of brine, because the car started smelling like that. Marty brings it into the building. The dressing room starts to smell like that. So Davey and Owen knew something was up. So they got dressed in their cars, and then they brought their bags in like an idiot, and they went to the ring, and then Marty poured that bag of brine in each one of their bags, and sent them home with their clothes smelling like that. So yeah, he was pretty crazy. Like,
He
he would,
alleged with me that he'd slept with 5,000 women. Do you think that
I
could be?
believe it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I've been to Marty, his old house in Florida, and Marty had literally like stacks upon stacks of photo albums, and stacks upon stacks of loose pictures of different women that he had been with. I mean, and when I'm saying stacks, multiple stacks. And I'm sure he hasn't slowed down or stopped,
Oh, I'm sure too.
And he and Sean, he would tell me that when they had that really good run and they were really super over, like they'd walk down the hallway in the hotel, and there would be a line of women sitting on either side of the hallway on the floor, waiting for them to go to the room. I mean, it's not like now. Back then, and that's the thing. You can tell when you're really doing good business is how many women are coming to the shows. That's when you know if a company or a territory is really making money. It froze up because how many women are in the audience when UFC was really super hot. Look at how many women, and not just women, but how many attractive women. When you go back and you watch, like when the Von Erichs were so over, they couldn't even make it to the ring. When the Rock and Roll Express and Mid Atlantic were so over, there were women all over the place. That's when you know you're making money.
Now, I recently interviewed Daniel Puder. I heard on Bruce Pritchard's podcast that Bruce said creative didn't have anything for him, but talking to Puder after he won the Tough Enough and it was a fan vote, they wanted to bring him in as a heel. And of course, he never really ended up doing anything in WWE. Do you think they dropped the ball with him, not at least giving him that one match against Kurt Angle?
No, I don't think so. I mean, you have to understand, like, to do things right, to do things correct, it takes years to learn. It takes years of experience. And I told all the kids, I'm like, hey, this sounds like a great opportunity. I said, but realize if you win, you know, you're winning $1 million prize, but now they have $1 million worth of expectations. It, this is a business, and everything is an investment of time, money, and effort in a product, which is you. So now you've invested $1 million in Daniel Puder. You want that $1 million back, don't you? Not to
Yes.
mention a return on that investment. But Daniel's too green to be able to ever give that to you, and you're going to sell a match because here's where it goes bad. You're going to sell this match with him and Kurt Angle. And Kurt's amazing. Kurt's so incredibly talented that he could have potentially, possibly been able to carry Daniel. But what if he couldn't? Well, now you've just put a ding in Kurt Angle because the match wasn't that good between he and Daniel, and Daniel's just going to fade away, and the audience is going to forget about him. But it could very well chip away at the very facade that you've built so strong with Kurt Angle, and that's something you wouldn't want to risk. So, he Daniel, to be fair, was an amazing marketer. He did a great job of politicking the audience and using, at that time in its infancy, social media, to be able to, use that to garner support to get himself the win. And, you know, and when he wasn't just released, they gave him an option. They told him, look, we're not going to renew your $1 million contract, which was $250,000 a year for 4 years. They said, well, but we will put you on a developmental deal. And, um, to Peter's, you know, um, how can you say? I mean, he didn't agree to it because he had been used to making the 250. He felt that he could do better out on his own, with mixed martial arts. And he chose to do that instead of just taking the developmental deal and staying with WWE. And he's still doing his own thing, and he's very successful. I don't know quite what he's up to now, but I know he does real well, and he's a very very smart, motivated individual. He seems to be doing just fine. So I'm proud of what he did, and how he accomplished it. I did feel that because if it had been left, all the other tough enoughs prior to that were my choice, my decision as to who won. And, I would have picked Miz on that one to be the winner. Um, but it was left Vince very much because American Idol was very popular at that time. Liked that format, one insisted on it being done that way. And Peter did he did an awesome job of marketing himself and was able to get that win.
And there was a fan, he calls himself Crown King of France. He wanted to know what the reaction was like backstage when you guys started to find out that Triple H was dating Stephanie McMahon.
Oh, that was a big ballyhoo. It was all the big scuttlebutt, because Wrestlers love to gossip, especially about each other. Yeah, it was a big deal because wrestlers love to gossip, and they especially love to gossip about each other. And that was a big juicy gimmick because, as far as we were concerned, she was no man's land. She was hands off. Like, you don't go with the boss's daughter. There, shit. Back in the day, the territory, Dick the Bruiser, Dick Atlas's territory. There was a guy by the name of Spike Huber. You know, wasn't big, wasn't a tall guy, but he was built. And Dick was, really pushing that guy. He was, he was a hell of a hand. He was good. He was a good hand. And Spike was married to Dick's daughter, and then Dick's daughter caught him with a rat with one of the girls that came to the arena, and that then pretty much ended Spike Huber's career. He was gone, like disappeared, ghosted from the scene of professional wrestling. When he was being groomed, especially in Dick's territory, but Dick's influence got him booked in other territories, and he was taken care of because he was Dick's boy. And then once the divorce happened, he just disappeared. That was it. So we were all like, oh, you're dancing with the devil to a degree. But, they've endured, and they seem to have an amazing relationship. And, you've got to respect and admire the two of them. I mean, they really seem to have a great life in all aspects.
Now, you worked with Steve Blackman. I was wondering how you liked working with him. And do you think if he hadn't quit the Brawl for All, he pretty much took himself out of it, that he had the potential to win it because his first match was a pretty impressive showing?
First off, that Brawl for All was a terrible idea. So bad that, like, when we were in State College, Pennsylvania one night, the fans started chanting, "We want fake." Legitimately, the entire
Really?
building started chanting, "We want fake." It was ridiculous. It was so bad because you ruined a lot of money-making wrestlers' reputations as being tough guys. And you never do a shoot in a work. You don't do it. It's bad. Plus, because you're selling one thing, you're selling a work, but now we're going to do a shoot, and we're going to tell you that the work is still just as important as the shoot is, and you need to be as emotionally invested. Doesn't work. Excuse me, not the coronavirus. I have a permanent sinus infection. So, without a question or a doubt, I think the only person that could have potentially given him trouble would have been Mark Merrow. And I don't think that Mark would have been that much of a challenge because of the fact that they allowed for you to take down your opponent, double leg, and you got extra points for double legging your opponent, taking them down. So, and that was what happened. Steve didn't take himself. He didn't quit the Brawl for All. He blew his knee out when he kept shooting in on the first guy he fought, which was Mark Merrow.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was what he did. He didn't want to stand up. He didn't want to stand up and try to strike with a Golden Gloves boxer, because Merrow is a boxer. He's gonna outpunch Steve. So Steve kept going in and taking him down to get the bigger points, so that if Merrow started landing punches, Steve would have a far enough lead. And then process, he blew out his knee in doing it. That's what took him out. But that was when Merrow then went and got re-entered in, and the office was so confident that Bradshaw could take out Bart Gunn that they swerved Merrow on the points, and they let Bradshaw win because they thought Matt Bradshaw could take Bart out. What they should have done is they should have put Merrow in there with Bart, and then Merrow would have picked him apart. Bart could have knocked him out if he'd have ever landed that big punch, that big left hand. But the likelihood is he probably wouldn't have been able to land it because Merrow, with his experience as a Golden Glove boxer, probably wasn't going to get hit. Because remember, the real art of boxing is not to knock somebody out. The art of boxing is to be able to hit somebody without being hit. That's the real skill that you're learning when you box. It's not how to take a punch or how to punch a guy. It's how to hit the guy and slip a punch or block a punch and not be hit.
Right.
And Merrow would have been a tough guy for Bart to have taken on. That would have, I think if they'd have left Merrow in it and not swerved him and put Bradshaw, I think that you'd have had an entirely different outcome.
Now, Butterbean in this Brawl for All documentary, I'm not sure if you saw it or not, said that the office fed Bart Gunn to Butterbean because they were mad that Bart won. Do you think there's any truth to that?
I don't know. That would be speculation. I don't know if they were mad. I have no idea, but I do know. I heard that someone said that Butterbean came in saying that he was willing to do business and put Bart over, and they said nope, let it fall the way it may. You know, if you knock him out, you knock him out, type of thing.
Which made
You know,
everybody look
and
bad.
and it made everybody look bad. Yeah, Bart, if they'd have wanted to, potentially, I think they could have done something with that whole thing with him. The way because it did get him over, without a doubt. And I think that they could have given him even a little bit of a run and tried to make some money with it and capitalized on it to some degree. But they chose not to. Why? I would assume that it's probably because they were upset that the plans didn't go the way they thought they would. And, you know, because Steve Williams was a more charismatic performer, and they could have potentially made a lot more money with Steve Williams if he'd have gotten over in that brawl for all, which was what it was really intended to do.
And Vince Russo claims he came up with the Brawl for All. Obviously, he was writing for WWE during the ratings peak when I guess you guys had rating at one time in the eights, and you worked with them in TNA over the years. I know he had some bad ideas like the Kennel from Hell match, which you've already talked to me about. But what's your opinion of Russo overall, good and bad?
Well, I think Russo was definitely very much a part of the success of WWE at that time. Um, Vince McMahon's formula was that he focused on only 4 or 5 guys, and then the whole 2-hour show was pretty much just those 4 or 5 guys. Where if you switched over to WCW, what was really, besides the timing, and the belief, because the key thing that made WCW successful was at that time people really genuinely believed that WWF was invading WCW when Kevin Nash and Scott Hall first showed up there. That was what lit that whole fuse, was that belief that, oh my God, these guys work for WWF. What are they doing here? And they're just invading. Because you didn't have the internet with people stooging it off. So the audience really bought into it. And that was what got the ball rolling. But then, with Bischoff going out and acquiring like the Lucha guys and Benoit and Malenko, and so you had a variety on the show that when you tuned in, you got to see a lot of different feel and style and different personalities, and it was fresh and it was different. Where in WWF it was very stale at that time. You had the same 5 or 6 guys that were the main focus of the show, and everybody else meant nothing. And Vince Russo was very instrumental in creating ideas that made everyone on the show from start to finish mean something. Everyone was a star to some degree. And my contention's always been that if you spend as much money as you do to go watch a wrestling show, there's going to be that one main guy that you really wanted to see, but the rest of that show, everybody that comes through that curtain better mean and entertain you to some degree. If not, it's a waste of time. The days of people spending enormous amounts of money to really just see one person or one match, even in boxing and UFC, that, I've heard lots of people say on a boxing or UFC card, oh, they've got so and so against so and so on the main event, but this undercard's the shits. I'm not going to sit through it. You know, they won't go. If it's a live event, they won't go. And if it's a pay per view or something, they'll just buy, you know, that last match. They won't sit through the undercard. You know, and that's bad business because 9 times out of 10 they won't buy the pay per view at all. Because if they're not going to buy it from the start, they're not going to wait. They'll probably forget or just not care. Well, I'll just watch it on YouTube or something like that. Whereas if you have a great undercard along with a great main event, then people are invested and they want to watch the whole thing get to the end. And that helps them motivate their friends and family, saying, hey, you got to come over. We'll make a night of it, be a party. You can watch this, or, hey, let's go out. Let's go to, they're having this at the arena tonight. And Russo was really good at doing that, of creating storylines that weren't just solely focused around 4 or 5 guys, but were focused around the entire roster to some degree. And everybody had a unique space and a unique place. And he was very creative in his utilization of the talent. And the same goes for TNA. He took that process a lot there. But Vince McMahon and Vince Russo worked very well because they balanced each other out. Vince McMahon was very detached and obviously had lost a little bit of touch of popular society, where Vince Russo was very tuned in to popular pop culture and modern society and all that, and he would infuse that into Vince McMahon. But Vince McMahon always knew what he was selling, which was at the end of the day, it was the finish. It was the fact that it was a competitive situation. Now, I've had, I'm not speaking out of turn. Vince Russo and I have had these conversations before where I'll make the statement that the only thing that's fake about professional wrestling is just the outcome. And he does not understand it. He does not grasp that concept. The idea that the only thing we're really selling is just that who wins and who loses. He thinks that it's all fake because you made it all up. And that's not the case, because the only thing that you're making up is why you're doing it. I screwed this guy's girlfriend. Well, now the audience hates me that much more and wants to see this guy not just beat my ass, but beat me, win, so he can get justice, so he can prove that he's the better man. He can get the one that finally at the end. Do you understand? And without that concept, without selling properly that understanding, you don't have anything. And Vince Russo we've had this conversation numerous times. He can't understand that. And he thinks like stipulation matches, cage matches, barbed wire match, Texas death match, whatever you want to call them, he doesn't understand that stipulations are enacted to level the playing field. Case in point, if a babyface wrestler is wrestling a heel wrestler, and you as the audience, you can clearly see throughout the match, babyface wrestler is better. He's going to win. And just as it looks like he's about to win, the heel wrestler intentionally, purposely throws him over the top rope and gets disqualified. Now, the audience is upset because they know the babyface wrestler could have been, would have been, should have won. Well, what do? Well, now we come back with a no disqualification match. The one tool that the heel wrestler had in his box to prevent him losing face was getting disqualified. He saved himself. He didn't want to do it. That's why it waited so long throughout the match. And when he was truly in dire situations, he did it. Because let's keep in mind, the wrestlers are prize fighters. If they don't win, they don't get paid. Okay? And that's why I try to communicate to the wrestlers themselves. If this were real, not a shoot, but if it were real, okay, the psychology behind what you're doing, the why you're doing it, is that if you don't win tonight, you can't pay rent. How aggressive would you be if your ability to eat and to be able to keep clothes on your back and a roof over your head was completely dependent on whether you won or lost? How aggressive would you be?
Very aggressive. You'd be
correct. And the whole idea behind wrestling, there's only 2 predominant ways to win: or pinfall and submission, and 99.9% of the time, those take place on the mat, not standing up. So why would you ever, unless you did something or the guy did something to you, and you showed me via your performance to the audience to make me understand, why would you ever knock somebody down and then bend over and pick them back up so you could do another bigger move? It makes no sense. That'd be like watching UFC, and there are 2 predominant ways to win, which are knockout and submission. And the guy knocks one guy down, but instead of ground and pounding him or grabbing a submission, he bends over, picks him back up so he can do another move. It's retarded. It makes no sense. And everybody today does it.
Yeah.
So Russo doesn't understand the concept. And he doesn't understand the stipulations that it is to balance or increase the odds of the fact that the babyface wrestler is going to get a fair chance to win and defeat the heel wrestler. Got disqualified, now no disqualification. Looks like now the heel's getting a little more offense, but again, you can clearly see he's going to lose. Just when it looks like he's about to lose, here he goes, reaches in his trunks, pulls out brass knucks, knocks the babyface out. Well, now we got to go to a tape fist match where now the odds are now again evened, and both guys have, their brass knuckles match where both hands are taped, and now it looks like the babyface is going to finally get his justice. Here comes the buddy, jumps him, beats him up on the behalf of the heel. Well, now we go to a tag match because now the babyface has to get a partner. The whole purpose of all this is that couldn't tell you how many times, and I directly, and again, I'm not talking out of turn. I would go to Russo, we'd show up at TV, and all of a sudden Mickey James and Victoria are in a cage match. I'm like, what happened the last TV that I missed? That they're now in a cage. They didn't even wrestle each other. And his thought process is, if somebody's flipping through the channels and they happen to see it, they see a cage match they're going to be more interested in and more likely to stay and watch that cage match than they are if they just see two people in the ring. Same with a ladder match or an Ultimate X match. He'd just throw them out there, and it was never that he sold the why that match was happening. And that ultimately is what really draws. It's not the match itself. It is the why behind the match, the heat, the need to see an outcome. And the only way we determine it in a fair enough manner is through this particular stipulation match. And he never got that. And I don't think, quite honestly, that his thought process ever bore fruit. I don't think that at any point in time did it ever generate a massive spike in ratings and then maintain them going forward. Somebody's just flipping through the channels and they happen to see a cage match. Oh my God, this is cool. But there's no why behind it, so it never retained anybody that he may have got.
And Bruce Pritchard's the head writer of SmackDown now. I know you've worked with him over the years. Any thoughts on him?
Bruce has a ton of experience. And listen to me, I want everybody to understand this. Okay, you can speculate whatever you want. You can say whatever you want. You're entitled to your opinion. But we've had that conversation about what opinion is, which is the lowest form of human knowledge. Bruce has been in this business since Paul Bosch. And the one thing I think everyone can agree on, Vince McMahon is not a stupid man. Because if he were a stupid man, he wouldn't be a billionaire. Stupid men do not become billionaires unless they win a lottery ticket. And he didn't. Okay? Why do you think that Bruce has been there for so long, and then when they parted ways, Vince reached out and brought him back? And why do you think he's now in charge of SmackDown creatively? Because Vince knows his value. Simple as that.
Okay. And Jason Bink had an interesting question for you. If you were to be offered a position with AEW, would you want to be a wrestler? You're obviously in one of your best shapes ever right now. Trainer, agent, manager. What would be your choice?
Probably just, I would really enjoy being a trainer. I think that, it would help them immensely to have a place that they could have a lot of their younger talent that don't have enough experience on live TV to understand how to properly perform and take advantage of it. To have an opportunity. I'm not saying this just because I have it, but I do own OVW, and we produce a live television show. Well, we did until the pandemic thing, every Tuesday night. And the express purpose for why I did it live, or I do it live, is because it gives a lot of these young men and women an opportunity to learn the ins and outs and get the experience of performing on live television before they go to a WWE or an AEW or an NXT, because if you've never done it, you've never experienced it, you don't know how to capitalize on it to its fullest extent. And and then you get an opportunity, you're literally thrown in the deep end of the pool and it's sink or swim. And a lot of times, due to your lack of experience, you sink, you drown, you lose that chance, that great opportunity to make a career. You can't capitalize on because no, you never got that experience. And I honestly think right now, I think we're the only place aside from AEW or NXT or WWE that you can do that, that you can actually go and get to work on a live television show on a weekly basis and start to really understand how to capitalize on where the hard camera is. You know, then when the AEW first started, there you could see a lot of the guys didn't understand where basically the hard camera was and how to play to it, and they still were playing to the audience in the building as opposed to the biggest audience, which is the audience at home. And that's just due to a lack of experience, and they never had an opportunity to do that, and here in OVW they do. So.
And Isban Arayo said he really thought your Shinobi character was cool, and why did it last, I think, only one match?
Well, they did. I used it a couple of times in WWE. Originally, I had created that character when I had the school in Ohio that I had started back in 1990. And I did it because if I trained you and we were going to go up to your hometown in Toronto, then the way I could make sure you had the best match in front of your friends and family was to work with me. So what I did was I literally created that gimmick, and taught myself how to move differently and have different body language so that anybody watching the show, I could come out and wrestle as Al Snow later and nobody would ever recognize that I was the guy under the hood because I worked completely different. And what happened was, because at the time as Al Snow, I didn't have a definitive personality or definitive character. I was good hand, but that was what held me back, was you couldn't describe me in a sentence or less. And the Shinobi character got more over than I did. And I started getting more booked more regularly as that, because it was a definitive character. I did a lot of stuff that had a personality even underneath the mask. And they used it a couple times in WWE. And then the last time they used it, Vince loved it that time. He was thrilled with it. But he was upset because I'd taken off the mask. And the only reason I took off the mask is that the writers were insistent that the mask be taken off and I be revealed as the guy underneath the hood. And I kept saying, no, you don't need to do that. That's not where the heat's at. You're making a mistake. And I went along with it when I really should have stuck to my guns and said no. And the very next day, Vince was like, why'd you take the mask off? That was the best match I've ever seen you do. Now we can't do anything with it. And I'm like, because they told me to. But, I could have easily refused to do it. And I should have. That was my mistake.
And you were advertised for Survivor Series 95, but you didn't end up competing in the match. What was the reason behind that?
I'm not real sure. You'd have to ask somebody else. I was booked on it, and then there was a change of plans, and I think they put Bob Holly in or something instead. I was never privy to the inner workings of the office at any point in time while I was there in WWE, or still to this day. That's one of the mistakes I talk about, is that, it was my fault because I didn't ask questions, and I should have. But I showed up at TV for, how many years was I there? From 95 to 2005, somewhere. I don't know. I'd show up at TV and they were having me do stuff, and no one, and I can't emphasize this enough, no one ever spoke to me. No one ever gave me direction. No one told me what we were doing, why we were doing it, where we were going with it, what they hoped to accomplish with it. Nothing. Hey, we need you to wrestle this match. Hey, we need you to do this vignette. Hey, you need to do this. You need to do that. And I just would go out and do it. But sometimes I think I missed the mark, or what their vision was, because they never communicated to me what it was. And I mistakenly never asked. I never took the time to say, hey, what are we doing? Why are we doing this? What do you want me to do? Why do you want me to do this? Where do you want it to go? I never did. And I really should have, and that was my fault.
And Alexander Ramos saw your first shoot interview with me where you told the story of Ole and Gene Anderson, the experience you had with them kind of roughing you up in the training. He wanted to know if you think it was okay what they did to you, considering the way wrestling was at the time. And he also wanted to know what your opinion is of the stretching that Eddie Graham used to do to potential wrestlers with Bob Roop and some of the other guys stretching wrestlers.
Um, how can I? Because I do say this all the time too, and it applies to this interview and what I'm about to say. One, I'm responsible for everything I say, but I'm not responsible for what people understand. Okay, let's make it clear. I do not condone in any way, nor have I ever done it. I don't condone bullying. But I understand why Ole and Gene did what they did back then. And because still to this day, this is a very tough, physically, very tough business, but it's even tougher mentally and emotionally. And you have to understand one of the biggest shifts in the paradigm of professional wrestling is that the majority of the professional wrestlers that are in the business now don't make a living off of it. Back then, the majority of the wrestlers that were in the professional wrestling business made a living off of it. And it was their only means of a living. Okay. And they knew the value and the importance of how much it was to keep what they were selling. And that was the belief that it was real, that it was hard. Okay. And, you know, they wanted to make it as physically and emotionally challenging and mentally challenging on the people that wanted to try to get in, to have them go out and be a commercial where they go out and go, hey, you think that stuff's fake? Man, this is what I had to do. And I didn't even get in. You know, look at the bruises, look at, the broken nose, the black eyes, you know, that helped keep that mystique about it. But it also protected the business, because how many people does it take to ruin that illusion that you've spent so much time crafting? One guy. One guy. That's all it takes to destroy everything you've built. So they're going to make sure every step of the way that you're not going to be that one guy. Protecting the business was never kayfabe. That wasn't protecting the business. Protecting the business was not letting just anyone get in it. That was what was protecting the business. And if your livelihood, your sole means of making a living, and especially an amazingly good living, even back then, and if you don't believe me, listen to Cornette's podcast, and he'll give you the numbers. Where this also big popular misconception that wrestlers only made money now is insane. Nothing could be further from the truth. Nothing.
The top ones make more money now, but overall, there was more wrestlers making a living back then, right?
A really, really, really good living. Like healthy living. Like you can do what you want living. So, that's the case. And if you had that situation, what would you do to ensure that it stayed the same way? And again, I'm not condoning bullying. I experienced it. And I legitimately mean this. Like, there are a lot of people that are in the wrestling business right now that would never have made it 38 years ago. That's the truth,
Right.
because you had to go through so much to get in. Then you had to do so much to earn your spot in the locker room, not your spot on the card, your spot in the locker room. And not just bent physically, mentally, emotionally. They would twist you up every day, push you. And if you, God forbid, if you ever sold, because that was like putting blood in the water, and they were like sharks. You had no allies. They would just swarm on you and they would eat you alive. That's the truth. And then you had to make it through all of that. Then you had to earn your spot on the card. Then every night you had to keep putting, and you had to earn their respect. You were never given anything. And I truly believe that a large part of the degradation of the art of professional wrestling is in direct relationship to how accessible it is for everybody now. I went, I'll stooge myself off. I'm the last guy that would ever, I thought, go and try to have more bureaucracy. But I find it insulting, and I can't emphasize that word enough, insulting, that my wife, who's a professional licensed massage therapist, any state in the Union, United States, she has to attend a state accredited school. She has to be taught by a state accredited teacher. She has to spend a certain number of state required hours of training. She then has to pursue a certain amount of state required residency hours before she can even take a test, some monumental test that she then gets a license to be allowed to follow her career as a licensed massage therapist. Same goes for a beautician. Same goes for a barber, mortician, any licensed career. As a professional wrestler in the United States, in any state in the union that is controlled by a commission, you get a physical that varies from state to state, and you pay your money and you get a license. We're done. It's absurd. The number of people that I have been sitting in a locker room, and at 56 years old, I am in 10 times better shape. Not aesthetically, that's aside from the point, but aesthetically even, I'm in better shape.
Oh, yeah.
But I am physically in better condition than people that are half my age. It's an insult, and it's disrespectful to the sport and the art of wrestling, and to your own opponents and to yourself, that you are in such poor condition that you are now you're greatly increasing the odds of an injury to either yourself or your opponent because you are so out of shape. Not to mention that audience literally spent their hard-earned money and invested their time to come watch you so they could believe that you make your living in a physical combat situation, and you don't look like you could even beat up one of their kids. That's absurd. Yeah. I went to the commission in Kentucky. I went and had a phone conversation with the one in Maryland after a young man in Oklahoma that year, poorly trained, against somebody else that was poorly trained, did a spine buster, hit the back of his head with such force that he was in a coma for 4 days and then died. Do you know how many people every year die or are tragically injured in professional wrestling now? And the number grows exponentially every year because people have so devalued the art of it and what it takes as far as a necessity to learn the real basics and truly be trained. And anybody can literally open up a school and I'm a professional wrestler, I can train people. And literally you've got the blind leading the blinder, and the business has just become more degraded over time. I literally had to go to a commission and beg them to institute, one, a training license, two, all of the have a state. This before I even owned OVW. I had no skin in the game. So we're clear. Had nothing to gain from this. Institute an actual licensed and accredited trade school, real accredited teachers, and have them required to complete a certain number of hours and residency, and then continuing education, no different than any other licensed vocation. They turned me down, said they couldn't do it, made an excuse about liability, which is absurd, because by not doing it, they've actually increased their liability, as far as I'm concerned. Turned me down because they knew that it would winnow out all of the people who didn't deserve a license, which is a dramatic amount of people all across the United States and Canada. Mexico at least has the pride that they still require these people to pass a test in Arena Mexico before they get the use the term that they're a professional wrestler. Have some goddamn pride about it. Jesus, quit being such whores that you have to let anyone train everyone and literally have them go in, teach them a couple bumps, hit the ropes, here a few spots. Hey, we got a show next week. How about you get in? People are, every time you go in the ring, you are in risk of a life-altering or life-ending injury. That's a fact. Okay. And that risk goes up exponentially based upon your skill level and training and your basics and your fundamentals, period, and your physical conditioning. And if you don't want to do that, if you don't want to commit yourself, you don't have the passion to really, truly be a real professional, don't do it on any level. I get it. Like, I'm not bagging on you if you're only working on the weekends or you're what we call a 40 or a 60 miler, meaning you don't travel no further from your house but 40 or 60 miles and you make a shot once a month, once every other month, once every 2 months, or whatever. That's fine. I'm not bagging on you. I get it. Okay. It's not easy, but you don't be anything less than an absolute professional. You look as believable and realistic as possible and be in his best condition. And if you don't look like aesthetically like an Adonis, back in the day, there were lots of guys that didn't look like an Adonis, but I knew when I got in the ring with them, I could always trust them because I knew they were in perfect physical condition. Dick Murdoch, you couldn't blow that guy up. Adrian Adonis, you couldn't blow him up. Ricky Morton, who's still at his age in his 60s, you couldn't blow that guy up. They have the pride and respect to be able to stay in a certain level of conditioning to where they're safe. And you're half or even a quarter of their age, and you're a slob sitting over there in the corner, and I'm a professional wrestler. No, you're not. And unfortunately, in wrestling, shit rolls uphill too. And it now affects how I and everyone else make our living, and it makes it that much more difficult for us. Because other people have bought a ticket and were severely disappointed when they saw you. And now they assume that because they don't recognize it and it's not WWE, it's going to be more of the same, a shit show with you coming out there looking like a slob in either poor gear and you're poorly trained and you have no athletic ability or conditioning whatsoever. You just happen to see a cool spot on Raw or New Japan, and you now want to do it at 10 minutes in the match that you're gassed to the gills and you're about going to drop the guy on his head. You're an insult. And there are more of those insults every day. And that was why I condone what the Andersons did to me. That's why I condone what Eddie Graham did, because stretching you was not punishing you. How do you know how to sell an armbar if you've never had one on? How do you know how to sell an ankle lock? How do you know how to sell any catch hold if you've never had one applied to you? You don't. So that was why they did those things. And it was to test you, to see if they could crack you and send you home. And if they sent you home, you weren't worth the time and effort to invest in the first place.
True. And Insaniac wanted to know, I know you have a lot of fake accounts out there, but he wanted to know if you've ever had an obsessed fan.
Oh, I've had several, yeah. And it's not fun. It's not fun at all. I know that the fans find it that they find it flattering, or they believe that they know you, and because of the fact that they've gotten some attachment to you because they get to watch you every week in their homes, and they believe they create some familiarity. Probably the worst time that I went through that was during that the Tough Enough run, because
Really?
oh yeah, but one, because the level of exposure was up dramatically, but two, because I wasn't being a gimmick, I was being me. I wasn't working, and I was, and people really started to believe that they knew who I was as a person, and that they had developed some kind of intimacy or a relationship with me that they never had. And I had some problems like stalkers, and the problem with these people is that you can't rationalize with irrational people. You can't win, because no matter what you do, you can't stop them. You can't motivate them. in any way. The basic psychology of the human brain is this: everybody operates on two very simplistic principles, and that is emotional pain and emotional pleasure. And when a person attaches a certain level of emotional pleasure to you, and the fact that if they don't get that, it's so emotionally painful, nothing will stop them, because you will do more. You will endure more physical pain if you associate the fact that you don't get the emotional pleasure of enduring that physical pain. It's more painful to not go through it. That's why we go work out in the gym, because we've attached the fact that if we don't train and we don't look a certain way or whatever, that we're emotionally, that's painful for us. And it's so painful that it motivates us to go in days that we don't want to go in and work out as hard as we work out and go through all the soreness and the injuries and everything, because we emotionally, painfully, it's so painful that we can't see ourselves living any other way. And these people that get that emotional attachment like that, and that the brain switches and they find you emotionally pleasurable and the lack of you so emotionally painful, they'll stop at nothing. And I do mean nothing to try to make themselves a part of your life. I had one lady, my mom, I was going through a divorce at the time. She called me up all upset and just screaming at me, and I'm like, what is going on? And she says, I found this on the internet. And this, again, now keep in mind, this is back in the 90s, late 90s, so the internet was still in its infancy. She found this on the internet with this woman in Columbus, Ohio, was creating a diary of a life that she was living with me that she wasn't.
Yeah.
She was stories of meeting the children and meeting my ex, and and she was substantiating all this because she was taking clips of information from interviews that I had done about, oh, my favorite cereal is Lucky Charms. So she was peppering in those little facts to where when people would read it, it was believable because it sounded like she knew me. I had never met that woman in my entire life, and yet she had an entire life with me that was completely fictionalized, and people in the public eye believed that we really had a relationship, that had read those internet journals, and it wasn't true. It was nothing could be further. I didn't know who she was. I'd never met her, and it caused a lot of problems. Had a young girl up there in Canada who this was back on MySpace back in those days, and contacted me and would just pursue me and would make fake email accounts and fake uh, MySpace accounts and all of this, pursuing me and contacting WWE and contacting the other wrestlers, pretending that she was other people, and then everything she could do. It was insane. I spoke to her. She has a lot of, she had a lot of emotional issues, the poor girl. But for these people, emotionally, it's like they're drowning. And you're that single point of hope. You're that light at the end of the tunnel, and they will drag you under in efforts to save themselves. They don't care, and you can't stop them. It's a scary thing. It really is. And at one point you pity them, but the next point, after a while, you begin to hate them because in short of you doing something drastic, there's no way to stop them. They just, and you can't rationalize with them because they are completely irrational.
And a bunch of people wanted to know your opinion on your definition of a good worker. For instance, is John Cena a better worker than a Dean Malenko, whereas John Cena is more of a charismatic character, where Dean Malenko is a better technician, but John Cena made a lot more money? Or what would be your definition be of a good worker in wrestling?
Well, let's define what a worker is. Let's define what a work is, because people don't get that anymore. What's a work? Well, a work is a lie. It's a sham. It is my ability to make you believe something that's not true. That's what it is. No ifs, ands, or buts. A work is to make you buy what's a lie. And the only lie in wrestling is that it's not predetermined, that I'm really out there trying to win and trying not to lose. Can we agree?
Yes.
A worker is a guy who is very adept at being able to make or convince a large amount of people in a lie, right?
Correct.
It has nothing to do with his physical ability. It has nothing to do with how many moves he can do. All it matters is, doesn't matter how he does it, is to allow you to believe in who he is and why he's out there doing it. The lie. All right.
Right.
So, how many times have we heard, oh, so and so is a great worker? When's the last time you were really able to believe in a person, in their persona, and why they were out there in their efforts?
It's
Be
been a
honest. A
it's been a
long time. And how many times do we bandy about that? Oh, he's a good worker. He's a great worker. He can do a lot of shit. He's a great worker. That doesn't make him a great worker. If you can successfully get people to invest in who you are and why you're doing it, then obviously you're going to make plenty of money. Now, technically, Dean Malenko mechanically far surpasses John Cena. But, and that's no knock against Dean Malenko. He's incredible. Okay. Describe Dean Malenko to me in a sentence or less. I'm not a wrestling fan. All right. You want me to watch wrestling. You love Dean Malenko. Tell me why I should watch it. And Dean Malenko in a sentence or less.
He's got 1,000 holds.
Okay. Meaning?
He's very skilled technically, and
You think that's going to sell me?
yeah,
If I say beer drinking, ass kicking redneck who flips off his boss, you think you're going to be intrigued to watch that guy?
I'd be interested. Yes.
That's the difference. You understand?
Right.
And John Cena, you could describe in a sentence or less to the average person to some degree that would captivate them to want to watch him. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been as successful as he was. Not to mention how, he was able to some degree make people believe and care in his matches while he was doing them. Because if he didn't, he wouldn't have stayed in that spot. Think of him what you will. So was he a great worker? Yeah, because he was able to get people to believe the lie of who he is and why he did it.
Now, just a few quick questions here. Someone wanted to know your favorite city to wrestle in and favorite venue to wrestle in.
Favorite city, I always loved Chicago and the Rosemont Horizon. And even when I'd go out there for Windy City Wrestling, we'd go to the International Amphitheater, which was where the Dumont network started professional wrestling on TV. And, but man, and Milwaukee was great too. That was an Midwest towns. Always when I was young, I always loved going to Cobo Hall because of all the history, and the audiences were crazy back in the 80s and in Cobo. And of course ECW Arena, because the audience was, they were as much a part of the show as the show. I mean, more so. That was really, there's a couple defining moments in the history of wrestling that altered it to what it is today, and that'd be number 3 on the list that I've kind of created. That that ECW is really predominantly the large part of the reason why the style is what it is today. Why the performers are performers and not workers, because we've just determined what a worker is. And people can debate with me and they can, well, that's your opinion. No, it's not. A work is a sham, it's a con, and that means that a worker is a con artist who makes you believe in the thing that's not real, and the only thing that's not real is who they are and why they're doing it. That's it. So we don't have, that's the issue, is we have a lot of performers in wrestling now, great performers. I mean, there's more and there has been for probably a decade and a half or more. We have more physical and athletic talent in the wrestling business than we've ever had in the entire history of wrestling. Now, when we've got fewer places to work, wrestle, perform, because we have very few actual real workers left in there. And the ones that are, they stand out. You know, everybody applauds and gives accolades, and rightfully so, to MJF. You know, in one breath they'll tell you kayfabe's dead, and the next second breath they'll sit there and loud praise onto MJF about the fact that he never breaks character. Well, which is it? Is it kayfabe's dead, or are you happy because he always is selling who he is? Because that's kayfabe. You have to make up your mind. You know what I mean? So, you know, and he wrestles like a heel. You know what I mean? He does a great job wrestling like a heel. Um, you know, and that's a rare thing today. We don't have, that's the other thing we're missing in the equation, is that no matter how you tell a story, whether you tell it through your physical actions and your body language and your facial expressions in the context of a competitive situation such as wrestling, or you write it down in a book, or you act it out on the stage or on a screen, you need an antagonist and you need a protagonist. And in wrestling, we really don't have any real antagonists anymore. We don't have any real heels that are willing to make the opposite person look better than them so that they have the express reason to do something heinous to gain the advantage. It's not what a person does that gets heat. It's why they did it. Even in your own life, what people do doesn't piss you off. It's because you think of a reason why they did it, and that's really what pisses you off, is the why they did it. And the same goes in wrestling. And we no longer sell the why anymore, you know.
And Cactus Jack Black wanted to know if you ever witnessed any locker room fights.
Oh yeah, I've witnessed quite a few over the years, you know, and some near ones too. Watched one guy get his eye popped out of his skull in one when I was about 19 or 18 or 20. That was I was only in business for a couple of years. That traumatized me watching him. I just looked at me, wetted his thumb, stood up, and you heard a little, and the guy's eye popped right out of his head and hung on his cheek.
Who was the guy that did the
Oh
eye?
God,
Like,
I can't remember the guy. They were in a fight over a rat, and they were in a match. It was a lumberjack match, and we're out there and ringside, and they started getting stiff with each other. And the one guy went down and was looking right at me, and he just kind of stuck his thumb in his mouth because he wet his thumb so he could slide in easier. Turn around, popped it out.
and last question: as a wrestler, did you enjoy your time more in WWE, ECW, or TNA?
Honestly, I enjoyed every one of them, and I'm most grateful for WWE because it's if I hadn't been to WWE, I had a great career even before. I mean, I had been working for 14, 15 years before I went to WWE. I know that sounds great. You know, I had a guy, one of the guys here, we were having a conversation, and I was teaching class, and you know, he's like, "How long was it before you got signed? Before you got signed?" Because let's face it, that's every young guy and girl's
Oh,
whole sole goal is just got to get signed. Just got to get signed. And he was like, well, you know, how long was it? And I was like, I don't know. I've been working for probably 14 years. He's like, what? What? It took you 14 years? I go, yeah, because that wasn't the goal. The goal was just to work. And the WWF at the time it was a bigger, more prominent territory that it was a bigger platform. You know what I mean? That was it. It wasn't, oh my God, I've got to get signed or else I have no career. It was, I have a career, but if I go to WWF, I'm going to make better money. You know, that was it. And it just blew his mind. and, um, and that's why I say, like, you know, and I mean it when I say it, like, working for WWF, WWE, ECW, and, you know, WWA, you think of it in an AWA, you know, if it has a W in it, I've worked for it. It was awesome working everywhere. It's just that WWE, I made the most money, and it was the most prominent platform that if I had not had that opportunity, we wouldn't be having this conversation because nobody would care. And two, it wouldn't allow me to continue on and have a career even after WWE that, I've been able to travel the world and make an enormous amount of money, all because I, had that run in WWE. So, it was great. It was awesome. And ECW was a blast. I mean, probably, was such an awesome time. The locker room the morale was so great, and business was good, and I was really getting over, and I was having fun, and I had freedom to do what I want. Paul would let you do whatever you wanted. He didn't come down on you. But Smoky Mountain was awesome because, I'm working every night with those guys. God, to work with Ricky Morton and Robert Gibson are so ridiculously good, and physically and mentally and creatively, like I was firing all cylinders, and quite honestly, we'd talk a little bit, maybe if there was a spot or two that we wanted to do, for 14, 15 years, I'd go in the ring and we'd have a spot or something we want to do. And if it came up, it came up. If it didn't, nobody cared. And we just went out there and we had so much fun, just calling shit as we did it. And it was so easy and so effortless. And, and then it's changed, it's everybody has to mentally rehearse absolutely everything they do. And, I'm probably going to say something controversial here. So you'll be happy because it'll piss people off and it'll make them want to hear it. I firmly believe, and I think I can prove it, wrestlers don't wrestle for the audience anymore. They wrestle for each other. How? Why? Well, I'll tell you. Thanks for asking that, Devin.
Well, I already know the answer to that, but yeah, you can tell me.
The only reason that the wrestlers get together and they meticulously go over every step, plan everything, leave each other, mentally rehearse it, come back, refine it, and then mentally rehearse it again is because they're terrified that they're going to make a mistake. And the only people that will ever know they really made a mistake are the boys in the back. And one or two people that are in the audience writing a report.
Right.
That's it. No one in the audience is really going to know or understand that something got screwed up unless they openly demonstrate that it has. They worry. And here's the other way I can prove it. They only ask one question when they wrestle now. One question. When I first broke in the business for 14 years, 15 years, the only question I ever heard was, what's the house? How many people are here? Now, the only question I ever hear is, did you see my match? The only question you're going to hear these days is, did you see my match? And they ask that of each other. And the sad thing is that no one saw their match because they were too busy calling their match because they were worried the other guy was going to watch theirs. They don't care what the audience thinks. They only care about what each other thinks. Because back in the day, we only cared about what the audience thought, and we only cared how many people were in the audience, not what the other wrestlers thought of our match. And they are so preoccupied with that now, so overwhelmed with it, eaten up with it. And I can prove it even further. All of these empty arena shows will prove that point even more because they haven't altered, they haven't changed nothing about their performance. It's as if there's still 20,000 people in the building and there's not a soul, and they still perform exactly the same way.
That's true.
And that's sad. It's a shame. It really is.
One of your points that you just mentioned made me think of that Undertaker documentary because you mentioned if someone screws up, only the wrestlers are going to know. And in this Undertaker documentary, they're bringing up screw ups in matches that like nobody knew. So I question why they do that, but it's not my problem, I guess.
Hey, look, it's not my circus, ain't my monkeys. So, it is our problem, though, because it is our business or it's the wrestler's business. And unfortunately, their job is not to perform. Their job is to motivate numbers of people to come watch them. And they're making that job infinitely more difficult by the way they perform. And they're now making it harder for you, if you run a show, to draw an audience because the audience isn't getting what they paid to see.
I
It's
had that
no
issue
different than
last
paying
show,
to,
going
yeah.
around putting posters up. They're making, some of these shopkeepers are making fun of me that I'm still promoting wrestling because they see some of this stuff on TV.
And they think it's a joke. They act like it's a joke now. So if it's a joke, there's no value to it. There's no value to it. They're not going to pay to see it. And that shopkeeper, he's going to now, people are going to come in that shop. They're going to see the poster. They're going to start a conversation, and he's going to laugh about it to them. And now they're going to not want to come see. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We're fulfilling our own prophecy of the death of the business. It's sad. It really is. And at any point in time, the wrestlers could take control over it again, and they could be the ones who dictate how it goes. But they are so eaten up with wanting the critical acclaim and the accolades as opposed to really making things successful and then being able to do what they love to do for a living. And it's disappointing, it really is. But what do you do? I mean, I can only control my little part of the world, and you know, and try to give people, it's no different than if you went to watch a magician and while he's sawing, the woman in half, he's turning around to the audience going, "Ah, don't worry, it's okay, it's all fake. I've got another girl down here with her legs out through the box, and then she's up here with herself tucked in. I'm not touching her with the saw at all." Well, then what was the point of me sitting here watching you do it? You know, and that goes back to our whole conversation about the social media and all of that, and what a worker is, and what we're really selling, etc. If in the degradation of, again, this all ties into how these people are being to the wrestling business and what they're being taught from the ground up, and they're not being taught those things. They're not being taught those concepts, and they're influenced by people that in their eyes are, and quite honestly, are successful. I mean, they're more successful than I am. They're making more money than I am. Um, uh, you know, uh, but it still doesn't change the logic behind what it is you're trying to do. You know, you can, and you can claim all you want that the business has changed. It's grown, it's evolved, it's developed. Yes, absolutely. But at the end of the day, the audience still is buying a ticket to believe in those two very basic concepts that they've always bought a ticket to believe in. And that's who the wrestler is and why they're out there doing it. That they're watching a physical contest, that the outcome's up in the air, and that the wrestler really wants to win, and because if he doesn't, he doesn't get paid, because they can relate to that, they can understand that, and that's the only reason you work your way up the ladder to get a championship, is because you get a championship, you make more money. Not only are you the best in the business, and have a trophy to prove it, but you're also a guy who gets paid bigger purses because you now are in bigger bouts. That's the thought process, and that doesn't get communicated to these guys. They all think it's a video game, you know and using the analogy of like Mortal Kombat, because we've all experienced this. Mortal Kombat, even back in the day, had awesome graphics, amazing moves, the fatalities and all of that. But let's face facts. If you're not one of the people playing the game, how long does it take for you to get bored and you stop watching?
Immediate for someone like me.
Correct. Because you have no emotional connection to what's happening. And the same goes for professional wrestling. The moves, the athleticism, amazing. But if there is no consequence, a direct consequence, which is only that you could win or lose from those things, then there's no reason to continue to keep watching it. If you can't relate to the person, you can't, in the terms of the wrestling business, get over a babyface, which means that the audience actually identifies with and wants to live vicariously through this individual. you know I've used that analogy all the time, that we walk outside right now, somebody's setting fire to a car, it's not your car. You're not going to try to stop this guy. Let's face it. You're going to video him, scream world star hip hop, put it up on the internet. Why? Not your car. But if we walk outside and see somebody setting fire to your car, you're probably going to take action. You have more invested. If we walk outside and see somebody setting fire with your car, with your family and your dog in it, you're probably going to try to kill the guy. My job as the heel, your job as the babyface wrestler, my job as the promoter is to make you that audience's car, to make you that audience's car with their family and their dog in it, whatever means it takes. Because then we do one thing to you, we've just done it to everybody in the audience, and they're invested. But then the second that you go out on social media and you go, it was all bullshit, don't worry about it, I didn't get set on fire, it was a fake flame. Well, now they're all let down and they don't care anymore because now there's no consequence. So, it's a very frustrating sometimes thing to deal with.
So speaking of social media, you're on Twitter at the real Al Snow, Facebook Al Snow, Collar and Elbow is your t-shirt company. I think you have a Shad Gaspard shirt, but could you
Yeah.
fill us in on all that?
Yeah. The Shag Gaspard shirt is the memorial shirt. 100% of the funds go to the Gaspard family. I went to the service, spoke to the sister. They're taking all of the money from the GoFundMe and from that, and from Pro Wrestling Tees has got a shirt as well. I encourage people to buy the shirts wherever they can get them. And all that money will go to in an annuity for Araya, Shad's son, and he won't be able to touch it until he's 21. He's 10 now, so it won't replace Shad, that's for sure, and it won't replace the husband or the father. But it's at least something that we can do for you know for the family. And go to collarandelbowbrand.com. You can get the shirt. I'm at the Real Al Snow on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And you can go, if you want more information on OVW, you can go to ovwrestling.com. We're on the YTA network. It's a national network now. We're in 44 million homes across the country. We're on our local broadcast channel. We're up to almost 1,100 consecutive episodes of television. And we have a new television show that we're producing that's up to 22 episodes, and that's OVW Overdrive. It's its own unique show. It's not just a recap show. And if they want information on the only trade school in the world accredited by the State Office of Proprietary Education, they control all trade schools and universities, colleges. You go to aswa.live and you can get information on that. It's a 2-year program, teaches not just the in-ring skills, but also camera operation, business management, live event management, uh, television writing, creative writing, social media management, etc. So we try to give people, men and women, the skills to have, because it's not a matter of if, it is a matter of when your career will end in the ring. And if you don't have some kind of other skills, then you're not going to be able to be an asset in the wrestling business.